So a book called Grandad's Pride has been shown to preschoolers in the UK. It features essentially two elderly gay gentlemen wearing leather fetish gear, embracing each other, and scenes of trans men, if you like, with their double mastectomy scars. Interestingly, some parents in Hull tried to pull their 4-year-old out of school after the school had shown this book around to the kids. And the school's reaction was to call them bigots, essentially. Now the school has agreed that it's probably not appropriate for 4-year-olds. Tom, what have you made of this story?
Well, you do feel like it's hard to believe that these stories when they come across. And yet every time and time again, this is what we're seeing. There does seem to be this very kind of effortless capture of everything from a reading list to the library at a preschool by this ideology, and also just the lack of appreciation of how this stuff isn't really appropriate. I mean, it's just, you do wonder how you could get into a position where you're a teacher or someone who runs one of these schools and thinks that's just absolutely fine because we want to be progressive, don't we? We want to be pro-LGBT. There's just such a thing as age appropriate. Yeah. Is that such a radical, bizarre position that one has to take in this particular situation? If that makes you some kind of crazy conservative, then sign me up. But it's just obvious that previously there's always been, when you're talking about kind of school curriculums and school libraries and so on, there's always a bit of kind of back and forth about what is and isn't appropriate. Sometimes that can be taken down a very kind of a liberal route. Sometimes, the conservative Christians of old campaigning to get anything that might feature a homosexual character taken out of a high school library and so on. But, the baseline that everyone would agree on, there's certain things that it's not acceptable to show to young children, sexually explicit material, anything which could deeply upset them. You don't want to be at the same, when you're dealing with kids who are 5, 6, 7 years old, you're not going to read them the Marquis de Sade or something like that. Was surely understood. And yet with the whole gender ideology thing, that's gone completely out of the window, it seems.
Jacob, what have you made of it? I mean, there's just sort of a basic failure of common sense or of understanding what's appropriate for children.
Yeah, well, I think one of the most depressing things about the whole incident, and like every other incident of its kind, is that no matter whether you think, on the one hand, that maybe kind of it's creepy, bordering on kind of paedophilic, this obsession people have about educating very, 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 very young children about the intricacies of different kinds of sex. Or if you just think that, at schools, wouldn't it be useful if the kids, even at kind of younger ages, but if they were learning kind of actual stuff that resembles education. Yeah. Whatever your kind of problem is with it, if you bring up the fact that maybe this might not be appropriate, suddenly it's like stoking a culture war. Yeah. And of course it's the opposite. It's people reacting to a culture war that's being waged on them, this attempt to colonize their lives and their children's lives by hammering home kind of all of the obsessions of certain adults. And that's what people are reacting to. It's not people kind of who kick back against this waging a culture war, it's people objecting to having a culture war waged on them.
Yeah, and that does seem to be a form of indoctrination rather than education. And it's all, because it's always one way, isn't it? It's always usually promoting gender ideology, for instance. It's not just this book. You're going to have a visit from a drag queen in your school every term or whatever it might be.
I think the point you made, Jacob, about how, who started this cultural war, really, I think it also speaks to the fact that when people on the other side of this argument try to push back, they'll often try to characterize the people who are concerned about these books showing up in preschools as, again, a kind of rehash of a sort of blue rinse conservative 30, 40 years ago. Getting
Section 28 all over again.
Section 28, or if you look to America, the kind of, are you there, God, it's me, Margaret sort of situation or something like that. I think that gets things entirely the wrong way around. In those situations, you had, say, quite religious, intolerant people trying to impose their view of the world onto a school curriculum or a school library. In this instance, we have very intolerant pseudo-religious people trying to impose their view on school from within the school itself. That's essentially what we're talking about. And the responses, particularly in the UK, but in the US as well, have come from people from across the political spectrum, the parents who have just said, this is too much. This is obviously inappropriate. It's entirely a kind of common sense check. But again, it's just another reminder of who's the one who is starting these culture wars. It's quite clearly one side, not the other.